From WBRN Radio and on the Bostonred Network. This is the Numbers Man side, this week in economics on the 7th of March, 2020. Quite a week. The market was up and it was down, and it is now down. A seesaw, and we have a model here at Cranston Analytics called the seesaw model, and that's basically what the market is doing. Very interesting situation here. We beginning to see a little bit of preview, I should say, of economic activity in China. They are down, about 16-17% there in terms of some economic activities. We'll look at the some of that from the Kazan organization later here with China. And we have the latest job news from the Bureau of Economic Statistics, and also some trade news is in the U.S. Now, the jobs news was basically for February, before the COVID-19 actually is the proper name for that, and we'll use that. And one of the things to remember about this particular virus is that the numbers are climbing. Over 100,000. Our models have been pretty good at tracking those. Over 100,000 now, but you have to remember that in many areas, not just China, the numbers are underreported because people have been on the move, thousands of people, and there is no accurate way to track these people until actually start testing in various cities, whole groups. In Iran, there are upwards of 5,000 cases out there, but there are many more. They didn't have the test kits, and the test kits become an issue in the U.S. A statement by the administration that the U.S. had the quote-unquote best health care system in the world is factually incorrect. The U.S. does pay more money per capita than any country in the world, but the results are not the same. And we'll start to see those with the outbreak out in Washington State around a long-term facility in Kirtland, Washington. And that is a facility where people are there to recover and have quote-unquote pre-existing conditions. But there's also outbreaks in other parts of Washington State that are hundreds of miles away, and we don't really have any indication of contact there. Now we'll see more and more of these types of cases. And off the coast of San Francisco, we have a cruise ship, believe it or not, with over 3,000 passengers, and it's supposedly being moved to some quote-unquote non-commercial dock. And there they have tested roughly 40-something patients, and 50% of those, mostly crew members, had it. And we've had people that on and off that cruise evidently at one time went to Mexico, came back, and was on its way to Hawaii. And it never got there. So, in other words, we're seeing more and more of these types of spot detections, let's say. And on the East Coast, outside of New York City, New Rochelle, for those familiar with that area, I believe that is in Westchester County. Anyway, nonetheless, there was an attorney there that had been a carrier of the virus, and now some people in that area. And in Washington, the first case there, somebody in his 50s. One of the things you can look forward to here is, as these cases appear in areas that are sparsely populated. So far, we haven't had the numbers in larger metropolitan areas such as New York and Los Angeles, but in San Francisco, they're taking no chances on this. They have advised people to stay away from crowds, particularly if they're over 60 years old and have some pre-existing conditions, diabetes, heart conditions, cardiovascular disease, I should say, and high blood pressure and what have you, and over the age of 60 years old, to be very prudent in those. The Stanford University has put their classes online. You see more and more of that going on. Some of the tech companies in San Francisco, Facebook is one, LinkedIn and several others, have told their workers to work from home. Now you'll have a lot of people working from home where they can. There are obviously workers that cannot work from home. And then we get to a national issue, this is an economic issue, of sick leave. Many workers do not have adequate sick leave and are not paid for that. That has to be addressed at a national level and not at a state level. And that is a big problem. And also the healthcare system, the administration said via the President, Trump, that anyone, once all the test kits get out there, that anyone would want a test could have it. Well, that's not correct. They have to have a physician's okay to get the test. Now, at some point in time, there's a possibility with a number of people having this test, as what we have understood here, the tests, at least the basic test kit, is more or less like an open source, and various companies have been given the test kit, and they, of course, improved the product. Quest is one of those, a nationwide testing company that tests all kinds of things, and you'll probably see some of these appear on the net as mail order tests. That will eventually be there. It's not there now. We do have some robotic tests that allows a laboratory to test thousands of tests in a day. Before that happened, if you were in San Francisco or wherever, the tests had to be sent to Atlanta, Georgia. Now, university medical centers are allowed to do it. They're doing that at the University of Washington and various other medical centers. They have their own tests. They are given the okay to do the test. So you will have more testing, but does this mean there would be an organization testing people in Spokane or various other Pocatello, Iowa, Idaho, or whatever? They may not be. They'd have to be sent to the nearest university to get the test. But the problem is on the overall economic system, as you see more and more of these principal areas affected. We had the cancellation of South by Southwest and the Entertainment and Technical Conference in Austin, Texas, that brought in excess of $300 million to the Austin economy. It is canceled. Various other tech conferences have been canceled because of the spread. All of the tech companies, Microsoft, etc., have canceled conferences. So you see much of that. Now, what that means is the travel industry is hit, and we really want to get a picture of that. We'll get a little snapshot in Q2. We're in Q1 right now, the first quarter, in the second quarter. In a third quarter, you'll still get some of that, and perhaps even into the fourth quarter. So we at Cranston Analytics expect the economy to slow down. Internationally, the economy is slowing down. And not only China, we look at Italy and various other economies. In France, the same thing. They've done mass types of closures, and even in China, the public transportation system in some types of some cities, I should say, is now open, but at the same time, there you have a national identification card. You need that to get on the metro. So that is a pressing situation, and also the drink industry. We'll go over that when we start to do the numbers, the employment figures here with those. And what will happen with sporting events? Well, there are contingency plans already being made by Major League Baseball, the hockey organization, etc., to have games scheduled in stadiums, and the only people will be there will be the technical people, the players, and whatever auxiliary personnel are needed. And there's also a situation in Major League Baseball to limit the number of people that can be in the locker room facilities and there, because they don't want the players to needlessly get COVID-19. That would have a player out for 2+ weeks or more, because the players are younger people and in good physical shape. So a little different situation perhaps there, but still, those are some of the situations. They are lingering situations, and we look at the psychology of the market. Parts of the market that will be hit more than others with this supply chain situation coming up there. And globally, the reaction has been, at least in the U.S., that to wall off the U.S., at least by restricting travel from some nations, that has not worked. And there's different thinking, obviously, on this. In Wuhan, it was in China, a different situation. That is a city of over 11 million people, and millions of those people had been on the move for the Lunar New Year. So they're all over the place. So that was one of the reasons that they shut things down. Factories, everything was shut down. They're back up now. Probably at least some of the factories around 40%. But we'll know more about that later in the ball game. And one thing to remember, that this is time sensitive. We don't have a correct benchmark. So when you hear on the news that so many people have died in X city, etc., well, that's just so many people have died. Larger numbers of people die from influenza, and the authorities have to balance giving information to people against hysteria. And we've had runs on basic supplies that people need. People do need supplies, and they should obtain those supplies when they have the opportunities, particularly cleaning products. They need those, and isopropyl alcohol above 60% of that, if you can find it. I was looking the other day for some, and there was not a bottle of isopropyl in the place. But there are various other solutions, hand cleaning solutions. In fact, one place was using a peroxide, and I don't know the percentage in peroxide there. But there are also some dodgy, false claims made by some, including Jim Baker, to get people to pay $300 for something called silver. That would be totally ineffective with this virus. They don't say that it has been tested on this virus, but perhaps it would help you with the flu. But again, that is a situation you want to stay out of. Let's start to do the numbers here to get excuse me, as much of the statistical picture as one can. Some consensus, at least amongst the economists that hang around Reuters, that the number would be somewhere around 175,000 jobs created for February. We were a little bit skeptical at this mic of that number. We felt it was too low. And the number they have is 173,000 jobs are created there, and the unemployment rate is little changed at 3.5. Didn't expect that to happen. This is the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Sorry about that one. Anyway, let's look a little bit at this. These are normally what the establishment survey and the household survey. The household survey will start at the unemployment rate 3.5%, number of unemployed persons at 5.8 million, and a little changed in February. The unemployment rate 3.5 or 3.6 in the past 6 months. Amongst major groups, rates for Asians declined by 2.5% in February. Rates for adults at 3.3, male and female at 3.1, and now women. Teenagers 11% for Europeans, 3.1%. Actually, it dropped for African Americans at 5.8, and for Latinos at 4.4. The number of long-term unemployed, those jobless, 127 weeks, at 1.1 million, little changed in February, and that group accounts for 19.2% of the unemployed. The labor force participation rate remained at 63.4% in February. The employment population ratio at 61.1, little change over the month, but it was up 0.4% over the year. The number of persons employed for part-time at 4.3 million, little change there. There was some information I read in The Guardian about Target, where a number of people, they had increased their rate, but at the same time, some people say we're getting 30 hours a week. It was reduced to 15 or 10. One of the developments we don't have any numbers here, but discouraged workers is a subset of marginally attached who believe no jobs were available, were 405,000. That was in February, a little different than previous months. The establishment survey, total non-farm payroll rose at 273,000. In January 19, job growth averaged 178,000 per month. In February, notable job gains occurred in healthcare, social assistance, food services, drinking places, government construction, and professional technical service, financial services. Employment in healthcare and social assistance increased by 57,000 in February. Healthcare added 32,000 jobs with growth in offices of physicians, 10,000. Home healthcare service, you're going to see a lot more of this, at 10,000. Individual and family service, 18,000 over the past month. Employment increased by 368,000 in healthcare and by 191,000 in social assistance. Now, food and drink places, we're monitoring this because we'll see decreases. They added in February 53,000. Employment industry was increased by 252,000 over the past 7 months, following a lull in job growth in early 2019. Government workers increased by 45,000, led gains in state government, education, 16,000 there. Federal employment by 8,000, reflecting hiring of 7,000 temporary workers for the 2020 census. Construction added 42,000 jobs, following a similar gain in January, 49,000 in January. In 2019, average of 13,000 per month. In February, employment gains occurred in specialty trade contractors, 26,000. Residential building at 10. In professional and technical service, increased by 32,000. That occurred in architectural engineering services, 10,000 there. Scientific research development services, 5,000. Employment continued to trend up in computer service, design, and related services, 8,000 there in the past 12 months. That sector has added 285,000 jobs. Employment in financial activities increased by 26,000 with gains in real estate at 8,000. Credit intermediation and related activities at 6. Over the past month, financial activities have added 160,000 jobs. Employment in other industries, mining, manufacturing, wholesale trade, retail trade, transportation, warehouse, information changed little. The average hourly earning for workers increased by 9 cents to $28.52 over the past 12 months. The hourly increase has increased at 3%. The average hourly earning for production and non-supervisory workers increased 8 cents to $23.96. The average work week for workers, they use a private non-farm. We don't use that. I think it's out at 1/10 to 34 hours and 34.4 temps hours. In manufacturing, the work week increased 2 temps hours to 40.7 temps. Overtime edged up to 3.2 hours there. Production, non-supervisory workers, payroll increased at 1/10 to 33.7. The total non-farm payroll employment for December was revised up by 37,000 from 147,000 to 184,000. Changed in January, was revised up by 48. You'll see that this time of the year from 225,000 to 273,000. Those revision gains in December and January combined were 85,000 jobs. After revision, job gains averaged 243,000 over the last 3 months. Now the next one will be released on April the 13th. We'll get the next release. Now employment status. This is in February of February of 2020. Non-institutional, civilian non-institutional population at 259, 628 there. And the civilian workforce was at 164 million people, basically speaking here. The participation rate, basically is the same, 63.4 in February. It was 63.1 last year this time. Employed last year in February it was at 156 million, and it's 58 million. So 45 was a change there. The employment ratio, a negative 1/10 there with it. The unemployed at, we said 5 million there. It was 6 million last year this time. The unemployment rate, a negative 1/10 there. Last year this time was at 3.8, and it's 3.5 now. And if we look at some of these rates here, we won't go over all of those, but 16 over 3.8, and it's 3.5 now. And adult men 3.5 and 3.3, down a little bit there. For Europeans, basically 3.3 last February, and it's 3.1 this February. For African Americans, it was 6.9 last year, and it's down almost a percentage point. 5.8 in February. It was 6, so 0.2 of a point, negative 0.2 of a point there. And let's see. Job losses, persons who completed temporary jobs at 2 million there, and basically about the same. Leavers at 841, that was last year, and it's 777, very interesting. Reentrants at 1 million, and it was 1,902,000, and it's a negative 35 there. Person marginally attached, it was 1403 last February, and it's 14408 this time around. We deep dive just a little bit into this. Mining and logging, it was a negative 5 and actually 4, a little pickup there. We expect that to go down, however. Manufacturing, 1.6, 3, it was 11, a little better there. Motor vehicles and parts, 1.6, that was last year this time. And it was 6.8 this time around, non-durable goods. And 167. The wholesale trade was a negative at 2.6 this time around. Last time was 5.8. Retail trade way down, 2.9 last year around, 29.3, excuse me. And this time around it was negative 7 there. So retail trade has been in trouble and continues to be in trouble. Temporary health services, let's see, negative 2.6 last February, and this time around it was a negative 3.3. And leisure and hospitality, it was a negative 23, and this time around it was 38. It has actually done a little better. We'll see some problems there. There's no doubt about that. Average work week we have that, so we'll leave that particular one and roll along here a little bit more. And let's see, where are we going here? We'll look at trade now while we're here. This is from the Census Bureau, and we'll get the overview of it. The deficit at 45.3, it's a negative 6.7%. This is U.S. international trade in goods and services. Exports at 208.6 million. That's a negative 0.4% there. Imports at 253.9 there. The January exports were 208.6 billion. 9/10 less than in December. January imports were 253.9, 4.2 billion less than in December. January's decrease in goods and services reflected decreasing in goods deficit of 2.6 billion to 67 billion, an increase in service surplus of 0.6 billion to 27.7. Year-over-year goods and service deficit decreased 8.5 billion or 15.8% from January 2019. Exports increased 2.3 billion or 1.1%. Imports decreased at 6.2 billion there. Oh, let's see. Goods, well, we got that before. The average export increased at 1.9 billion from January of 2019. The average import decreased, decreased 8.2 billion there. Balance payment deficit decreased by 1/10 billion. Import services decreased by 1/10 billion. Transportation decreased by 1/10 billion. We'll see that in real goods in 2012 dollars. The real deficit decreased by 2.3 billion to 77.7 billion, and real export goods decreased by 2.7 billion to 146.9 billion. Real imports of goods decreased by 5 and 1/10 billion to 224. Now revisions were revised from July through December. Goods and services there, and with the revisions were revised to less than 1/10. Export services revised down 2/10. So these are the countries here. The figures surplus in billions of dollars with South and Central America 5.8, with Hong Kong 1.8, with Brazil 1.7, with the UK 1.6, with OPEC 1.3 there, and deficits were recorded in billions of dollars with China 23.7, and with the EU at 13.5, Mexico 9.2, Germany 5.6, Japan 5.3, Italy 2.6, Taiwan 1.8, India 1.7 and 7/10 with Canada, 7/10 with France, and in Korea, who has its own problems with COVID-19, at 6/10 and 1/10 with Singapore, and Saudi Arabia less than 1/10. The deficit with Canada decreased to 3.7 million to 7/10 billion in January. Exports increased by 7/10. Deficit with China decreased by 2.1 billion to 23.7 billion in January, and now it would be obviously counting down from where we were. And I think we got most of these, so we'll just leave this selection here, and we will roll on as to where we're rolling to. Incidentally, on WBRN radio, you can tune to the Week of It Was. That's on the political side. Boston Red will have it for you also. And from the BBC, let's get over to the business page of the BBC while we're here, and we'll look at it. Also, we'll get some PCIs somewhere in this mech up here. And it's basically about the markets and the jitters involved in the markets. Petroleum or petrol has plunged 10% after the deal with OPEC collapsed and really never got off the ground. When we do it, we'll look to it and see exactly where we are going there. And let me get one other thing in here. The other reasons behind Wall Street's jitters, this is from the BBC, and again, until recently, Wall Street saw the re-election of President Trump in November as all but guaranteed in polls by Goldman Sachs, Deutsche Bank, and others, or where majority investors had predicted his win. We'll look into this and get it out here. But the spread of COVID-19 raises the risk of an economic slowdown. Bets have been scrambled. Investors don't particularly like the Democratic alternatives, according to this. That contributes to a giant fall in U.S. indexes in the last 2 weeks. That is from Lee Ferdinand, head of MicroStrategy's North America for State Steel Global Markets. Before last week, there was less concern who the Democratic candidate was going to be, because the expectation was that DJ Trump would be re-elected. Well, our model, the Ouija board model on the political side, has DJ Trump ahead.